How did my son believe he could abandon his disabled wife in the forest and walk away clean? That night, when the truth surfaced and a silent observer stepped forward, his confidence collapsed in seconds. What he didn't know was that I had been watching him too, and long before he realized who was really standing in the dark. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. I'm Darren Halloway, 58 years old, former deep-sea diver. These days I work with wood in my garage, building furniture and selling it online. Not much money, but enough. My hands still remember the ocean floor, the weight of pressure, the discipline of breathing slow when everything around you wants to crush your chest. Ethan is my son. 32. Handsome, confident, successful in real estate. He married Lydia 3 years ago. She was bright, energetic, always laughing. Then came the accident. A driver ran a red light, T-boned her sedan. She survived, but her spine didn't. Now she needs a wheelchair, medication every 6 hours, and patience she rarely receives. I hadn't been invited to their house in months. When I finally showed up with a handmade coffee table as a gift, Ethan opened the door wearing a polo shirt and irritation. "Dad, you should have called first." "I did. You didn't answer." He sighed and stepped aside. The house smelled like air freshener masking something stale. Lydia sat in the living room, her wheelchair positioned near the window. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Hey, Lydia," I said gently. She blinked slowly. "Hi, Darren." Ethan didn't offer coffee. He stood with his arms crossed, watching me like I was an inspector he needed to appease. "Nice table," he said without looking at it. "You still doing that woodworking thing?" "I am." "Retirement nonsense," he muttered, half to himself. "You could have stayed with the diving company. They offered you desk work." "I wanted to work with my hands," he snorted. "Yeah, real lucrative." I didn't argue. I've learned that silence makes people reveal more than questions ever could. Lydia shifted in her chair, wincing slightly. I noticed the pill organizer on the side table. Tuesday's afternoon slot was still full. "Lydia, did you take your meds today?" Ethan answered before she could. "She's fine, Dad. Don't micromanage." "I'm just asking. And I'm telling you she's fine." Lydia said nothing. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. I stayed another 20 minutes, making small talk that Ethan barely tolerated. When I left, he didn't walk me to the door. 2 days later, I met my brother Owen for lunch at a local cafe. He's older than me by 9 years, grayer, louder, less patient. He was already seated when I arrived, stirring sugar into black coffee. "You look grim," he said as I sat down. "Just thinking." "About Ethan?" I nodded. Owen leaned back. "That boy's always been too smart for his own good. Thinks the world owes him something. He's cruel to Lydia." "You sure? Or is he just stressed?" "I'm sure." Owen studied me. "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet." We ordered sandwiches. Halfway through the meal, I heard Ethan's voice across the room. He was sitting in a booth with 2 men I didn't recognize, laughing too loud, gesturing with his hands. I caught a fragment of his conversation. "Honestly, sometimes you've got to let go of what's holding you back, you know? Why keep carrying it forever?" One of the men laughed. "That's cold, man. I'm just being real." Owen noticed my expression. "You want to leave?" "No." I kept eating, though my appetite was gone. I watched Ethan from the corner of my eye. He looked confident, relaxed, enjoying himself. He didn't notice me at all. When he finally stood to leave, he glanced in my direction. For a second, our gazes met. He didn't smile. He simply nodded once, like acknowledging a stranger, and walked out. Owen reached across the table and tapped my wrist. "Darren, what's going on?" "I need to pay attention," I said quietly. "That's all." That night, I sat in my workshop and sanded a chair leg until my hands ached. The rhythm helped me think. Ethan had always been ambitious. Even as a kid, he wanted more than what we had. I worked long contracts underwater to pay for his college, his first car, his wedding. I thought I was giving him a foundation. Maybe I just taught him that other people were resources. Lydia deserved better. She'd been kind to me when Ethan wasn't. She remembered my birthday, asked about my projects, laughed at my bad jokes. And now she sat in that house, dulled and silent, while my son talked about letting people go. I turned off the workshop light and went inside. My phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Taking Lydia on a drive this weekend. Don't call." I read it 3 times. A drive. No return. I set the phone down and stared at the dark window. My reflection looked older than I felt. Something was coming. I could feel it the way I used to feel pressure shifts underwater, the kind that warned you to surface before the tank ran dry. I wasn't going to surface. I was going to dive deeper. I spent the next morning in my workshop, but I wasn't building anything. I was thinking, replaying conversations, watching patterns emerge like grain in wood. Ethan had always been impatient. Even before Lydia's accident, he hated waiting, hated inconvenience, hated anything that required sustained effort without immediate reward. I'd chalked it up to youth, ambition, the pressure of his career. But after the accident, something shifted. The impatience turned cold. I remember visiting the hospital 3 days after the crash. Lydia was barely conscious, hooked to monitors, her legs wrapped in stabilization braces. Ethan stood by the window, scrolling through his phone. "They're saying 6 months of physical therapy," he said flatly. "Maybe longer." "She's alive," I replied. "That's what matters." He looked at me like I'd said something naive. "Yeah, sure." He left an hour later for a work call. I stayed with Lydia until the nurses asked me to go. She squeezed my hand once before I left. It was weak, but it was there. Now, 2 years later, she barely spoke. The therapy had helped her regain some mobility, but the nerve damage was permanent. She needed a wheelchair for anything beyond short distances. She needed medication to manage pain and muscle spasms. She needed someone to care. Ethan wasn't that someone. I walked to the kitchen and made coffee. While it brewed, I opened my laptop and checked my online store. 3 orders this week. Not bad. A bookshelf, a side table, and a set of coasters. Simple work, honest work. It kept me independent. It kept me out of Ethan's way. That independence mattered now more than ever. My phone buzzed. "Owen, you free today?" "Yeah, why?" "Come by the house, as I want to talk." I drove over after lunch. Owen lived 20 minutes south, in a ranch-style house with a yard full of tools he never used. He met me at the door with a beer in hand. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "I slept fine." "Liar." We sat on his back porch. The afternoon sun was warm, but the breeze carried a hint of autumn. "You gonna tell me what's eating you?" Owen asked. I took a long breath. "Ethan's planning something." "Like what?" "I don't know exactly, but he's talking about a drive this weekend with Lydia. He told me not to call." Owen frowned. "Maybe he's just taking her out. Fresh air, trying to help." "Ethan doesn't help. He delegates." "Then what do you think he's doing?" I didn't answer right away. The words felt too heavy. "I think he wants her gone," I said finally. Owen stared at me. "Gone, you mean?" "I mean he's tired of taking care of her. Tired of the medications, the appointments, the responsibility. I think he's going to do something." "Darren, that's a serious accusation." "I know. You have proof?" "Not yet." Owen set his beer down. "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going to watch. And when I have proof, I'm going to stop him." He shook his head slowly. "You can't just follow your own son around like some private investigator." "Why not?" "Because it's crazy. Because he's your son. And Lydia's his wife. That didn't stop him from treating her like garbage." Owen rubbed his face with both hands. "Okay. Say you're right. Say he's planning something bad. What's your play? You going to confront him? Beat it out of him?" "No, I'm going to let the system handle it." "The system?" "Yeah. Police, lawyers, evidence. I'm not going to give him a chance to lie his way out." Owen looked at me for a long time. "You sound like you're going to war." "I'm going to protect someone who can't protect herself." He sighed. "All right. But if you need help, you call me. Don't do this alone." "I won't." I left an hour later. On the drive home, I stopped at the hospital outpatient clinic where Lydia used to go for checkups. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist recognized me. "Mr. Halloway, how can I help you?" "I'm checking on Lydia's prescription history, just making sure everything's up to date." She hesitated. "You're not listed as her primary contact." "I know, but I'm her father-in-law, and I'm concerned." She glanced at her computer, then back at me. "I can't give you detailed records without authorization, but I can tell you that she's due for a refill next week. Her last pickup was 3 weeks ago." "3 weeks? She's supposed to refill every 2. "I know. We called twice. No one answered." I thanked her and left. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the parking lot. 3 weeks. Ethan wasn't refilling her medication. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a notebook and a pen. I started writing down everything I knew: dates, conversations, the missed prescriptions, the cafe comment about people being a burden, the weekend drive. I didn't have enough yet. But I was close. I pulled up the browser on my phone and searched for local park rangers. The nearest station was 15 minutes north, near the forest access road. I'd driven past it 100 times. I saved the address. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it Saturday. I didn't sleep much that night, but when I did, I dreamed of diving. The ocean floor stretched out beneath me, dark and endless. I was searching for something. I didn't know what, but I knew I'd recognize it when I found it. A Friday morning arrived with gray skies and the smell of rain. I woke early, brewed coffee, and sat at my kitchen table staring at the notebook I'd started the night before. The pages were filled with fragments, times, dates, snippets of overheard conversation. It wasn't enough for a court. Not yet. But it was a map. I needed to follow it. At 9, I drove to the forest access road. It was a winding stretch of asphalt that led to a trailhead used mostly by hikers and campers. The ranger station sat just off the main road, a small wooden building with a green roof and a gravel parking lot. I parked and went inside. A man in his mid-40s sat behind the desk, reading a paperback novel. His name tag read Caleb Morris. He looked up when I entered and smiled. "Morning, can I help you?" "Just curious," I said casually. "Do you keep logs of vehicles that come through here?" He closed the book. "We do. Security measure. Why do you ask?" "I'm thinking about hiking this weekend. Wanted to know how crowded it gets." He nodded. "Weekends are busier, but nothing crazy this time of year. Most folks clear out by dusk." "Do you track who comes in after dark?" His expression shifted slightly, still friendly but more cautious. "We note unusual activity. Yeah. Late arrivals, vehicles without proper tags, that kind of thing. You planning to camp?" "Maybe." He studied me for a beat longer than necessary, then shrugged. "Well, if you do, make sure you register. We like to know who's out there." "Understood." I thanked him and left. As I walked back to my truck, I glanced at the small security camera mounted above the station door. It wasn't obvious, but it was there. Good. Back home, I spent the afternoon in my workshop. I needed to keep my hands busy while my mind worked. I selected a piece of oak and began shaping it into a small box. Something simple, something I could finish in a few hours. The repetition calmed me. Around 4, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Leaving tomorrow morning, early. Don't wait up." I read it twice, then set the phone face down on the workbench. "Leaving tomorrow. Early," I texted back. "Drive safe." He didn't respond. I worked until the light faded, then cleaned my tools and locked the workshop. Inside, I made a simple dinner: pasta, olive oil, garlic. I wasn't hungry, but I ate anyway. I needed to stay sharp. At 8, I called a lawyer named Nora Whitfield. I'd worked with her years ago when I was sorting out my retirement paperwork. She was precise, professional, and didn't waste time. "Darren," she said when she answered. "It's been a while. I need advice." "Legal advice?" "Yeah." "All right. What's the situation?" I told her everything. The missed medications, the overheard conversation, the weekend trip, the ranger station. I kept my voice steady, factual. I didn't want to sound paranoid. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You're describing potential neglect," she said finally. "Possibly endangerment, depending on what actually happens. But right now, it's circumstantial. You don't have direct evidence of intent." "I know. So what do you want from me?" "I want to know what kind of evidence would hold up. If something happens tomorrow, I want to be ready." She paused. "Are you expecting something to happen?" "I'm prepared for it." Another pause. "Okay. Here's what you'd need: medical records showing dependency on medication, proof that the medication wasn't provided, witness testimony if applicable, location data, timestamps, anything that establishes a timeline, and ideally a third party who can corroborate your observations." "What about ranger logs?" "If they're official and documented, yes. Those could help establish presence and timing." "Good." "Darren," she said carefully, "if you're planning to intervene, make sure you do it through proper channels. Don't put yourself in a position where you become the one in legal trouble." "I won't." "And if you need representation, call me immediately." "I will. Thanks, Nora." I hung up and stared at the dark window. My reflection looked back at me, shadowed and still. I opened my laptop and checked the weather forecast. Clear skies tomorrow, cooler temperatures, sunset at 6:43, I made a note of it. Then I pulled up a map of the forest access road and studied the terrain. There were 3 main turnoffs between the ranger station and the trailhead. 2 were gravel, 1 was paved. The paved turnoff led to a small parking area with a scenic overlook, isolated, quiet. I zoomed in on the overlook and memorized the route. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't sleep, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. What Ethan might do, what I would do in response, how to stay invisible until the right moment. At 3 a.m, I got up and made more coffee. I sat in the dark kitchen, sipping slowly, watching the clock. By dawn, I was ready. I dressed in dark jeans and a plain jacket. I grabbed a small backpack and filled it with water, a flashlight, a notebook, and my phone charger. Nothing unusual, nothing that would draw attention. I drove to the hardware store and bought a disposable phone, paid in cash, activated it in the parking lot. Then I drove north toward the forest access road. I arrived at the ranger station just after 8. Caleb was there again, sipping coffee and typing something into a computer. I didn't go inside. I parked at the far end of the lot, where the trees provided cover, and waited. At 8:30, I saw Ethan's car. It was a silver sedan, clean and polished. He drove past the ranger station without stopping and continued toward the trailhead. I waited 5 minutes, then I followed. I kept my distance. 2 curves behind, never close enough for him to notice my truck in his rear view. The road twisted through dense pines, the asphalt cracked and patched in places. Morning light filtered through the branches, casting long shadows across the pavement. Ethan's sedan slowed near the paved turnoff I'd studied the night before. He signaled and turned. I drove past without slowing, eyes forward, casual. Half a mile up, I pulled onto a gravel shoulder and parked behind a cluster of trees. I grabbed the disposable phone from my backpack, checked the battery, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Then I locked the truck and started walking back. The forest was quiet. No other cars, no hikers, just the faint rustle of wind through the canopy and the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. When I reached the turnoff, I moved off the road and into the underbrush. The ground was soft with pine needles. I stayed low, moving parallel to the paved path, keeping the trees between me and the clearing ahead. Ethan's car was parked near the edge of the overlook, facing the scenic view. The driver's door was open. He stood outside, phone to his ear, pacing slowly. I couldn't hear the words, but his tone was light, relaxed. Lydia was in the passenger seat. I could see her profile through the windshield. She wasn't moving. I crouched behind a fallen log and pulled out the disposable phone. I checked the time. 8:52. Then I opened the camera and started recording. Ethan ended his call and leaned into the car. He said something to Lydia. She didn't respond. He reached across her, his movements quick, efficient, and I heard the seatbelt click. Then he stepped back, closed the passenger door, and walked around to the trunk. He opened it and pulled out Lydia's wheelchair. Oh, for a moment, I thought I'd been wrong. Maybe this was just a scenic stop. Maybe I'd misread everything. Then he unfolded the chair and set it 10 feet behind the car, facing the trees. He returned to the passenger side, opened the door, and lifted Lydia out. She was limp, barely conscious. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he carried her to the wheelchair. He set her down and adjusted her position. Then he stepped back and looked at her. "This is better," he said quietly. "For both of us." Lydia's eyes fluttered. "Ethan." "Shh, just rest." He turned and walked back to the car. I kept recording. Ethan climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and reversed slowly. He didn't look at Lydia. He just backed up, turned the car around, and drove away. The sound of the engine faded into the distance. Lydia sat alone in the wheelchair, her head tilted forward, her hands trembling in her lap. I stopped recording and stood up. My legs felt steady. My breathing was calm. I'd seen what I needed to see. I walked out of the trees and approached her slowly. "Lydia?" I said softly. She lifted her head. Her eyes were unfocused, glazed. "Darren?" "Yeah, it's me." What are you doing here?" I followed Ethan. I knew he was planning something. She blinked slowly. He said we were going for a drive." "I know." He left me. "I know?" Her hands shook harder. I don't understand." I knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to understand right now. Just stay calm. I'm going to get you out of here." I pulled out the disposable phone and dialed the ranger station. Caleb answered on the second ring. "Forest Access Station. This is Darren Halloway. I'm at the scenic overlook off the main road. I need immediate assistance. There's a woman here who's been abandoned. She's disabled and needs medical attention. There was a pause. Abandoned? Yes. Her husband left her here. I have video evidence. I need you to contact local authorities and send someone now. Understood. Stay where you are. I'm calling it in. I hung up and looked at Lydia. Help's coming. She nodded weakly. Thank you. I stayed with her until I heard the sound of an engine approaching. A ranger truck appeared first, followed by an ambulance. Caleb stepped out, his expression serious. Mr. Halloway? That's me. He looked at Lydia, then back at me. What happened here? Her husband brought her here this morning and left her. I have video evidence on my phone. Can I see it? I handed him the disposable phone. He watched the recording in silence, his jaw tightening. This is serious, he said finally. I know. The paramedics approached and began checking Lydia's vitals. One of them looked up at Caleb. She's dehydrated and her medication levels are low. We need to transport her immediately. Caleb nodded. Do it. As they loaded Lydia into the ambulance, Caleb turned to me. I'm going to need a full statement, and we'll need to contact the police. I expected that. Where's the husband now? I don't know, probably on his way home. Caleb pulled out his radio and called it in. Within minutes, I heard confirmation that local police were en route to Ethan's house. I gave my statement to Caleb, then to the police when they arrived. I handed over the video, the timestamps, the notes I'd taken. I told them about the missed medications, the overheard conversation, everything. One of the officers looked at me carefully. You've been planning this. I've been paying attention. That's not the same thing. No, it's better. He didn't argue. By noon, I was back at the ranger station, signing formal documents and providing contact information. Caleb shook my hand before I left. You did the right thing, he said. I did what needed to be done. I drove home slowly, my hands steady on the wheel. The forest passed by in a blur of green and shadow. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the truck for a long time, staring at the workshop. I'd crossed a line. I'd gone against my own son. But I'd also saved a life. That was worth it. The next 48 hours moved like a slow tide. I stayed home, worked in my workshop, kept my phone on the table where I could see it. I didn't call anyone. I didn't reach out to Ethan. I just waited. Sunday afternoon, Owen called. Darren, you hear what happened? I was there. Silence. Then, you were there. I followed Ethan to the forest. I saw what he did. I called it in. Owen exhaled slowly. Jesus, so it's true. Yeah. The whole family's talking about it. Ethan's lawyer is already trying to spin it as a misunderstanding. Says he was just giving Lydia some fresh air and lost track of time. He left her in a wheelchair and drove away. I have video. I know. The police told me. They're building a case. Good. Owen paused. How are you holding up? I'm fine. You just turned your own son over to the police. That's not fine. It's necessary. He sighed. Yeah, I guess it is. We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. I went back to the workshop and continued sanding a table leg. The repetition helped me think. Monday morning, Nora Whitfield called. Darren, I've been contacted by the prosecutor's office. They want to discuss your testimony. When? Tomorrow, 2:00. Can you make it? I'll be there. Good. And Darren, this is going to get ugly. Ethan's legal team is going to try to discredit you. They'll say you have a vendetta, that you're estranged from your son, that you misinterpreted what you saw. Let them. You sound confident. I have evidence. That's all that matters. She paused. You're right, but be prepared. This isn't just about evidence. It's about family. People are going to judge you for what you did. I know. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with knowing Lydia's safe. She was quiet for a moment. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. I spent the rest of the day organizing my notes. I printed out the video stills, highlighted key timestamps, cross-referenced them with the ranger logs Caleb had provided. By evening, I had a timeline that was airtight. Ethan couldn't lie his way out of this. Tuesday arrived cold and clear. I dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, the closest thing I had to formal wear. I drove to the prosecutor's office and arrived 15 minutes early. Nora met me in the lobby. She looked sharp in a gray suit, her expression focused. Ready? She asked. Yeah. We were led to a conference room where two prosecutors sat waiting. One was a man in his 50s with graying hair and a calm demeanor. The other was a younger woman with sharp eyes and a notepad. The man introduced himself as Lawrence Grant. The woman was his assistant, Elena Ruiz. Mr. Halloway, Lawrence said, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming in. We've reviewed the evidence you provided, and it's compelling. But we need to understand the full context before we proceed." "Understood." He leaned forward. "Walk us through Saturday morning, from the moment you woke up to the moment you called the ranger station." I did. I kept my tone even, factual. I explained the cafe conversation, the missed medications, the text message from Ethan, the decision to follow him. I described parking at the ranger station, following at a distance, recording the abandonment. Elena took notes the entire time. When I finished, she looked up. "You said you followed him? How long had you been planning to do that?" "Since I overheard his comment about getting rid of people he saw as a burden." "And you didn't think to contact authorities before Saturday?" "I didn't have proof, just suspicion." "So you waited until you could catch him in the act?" "Yes." Lawrence leaned back. "That shows remarkable restraint, or remarkable planning. Which is it?" "Both." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough. Let me ask you this. Do you believe your son intended to harm Lydia?" "I believe he intended to abandon her. Whether he thought she'd survive or not, I don't know. But he left her without medication, without water, without a way to get help. That's harm." Elena nodded. "We agree. The question is whether we can prove intent. His lawyer is going to argue he made a mistake, that he panicked, that he planned to come back. He didn't panic. He was calm. I have video of him walking away without looking back." Lawrence tapped his pen on the table. "We'll use that. But we'll also need your testimony in court. Are you prepared for that?" "I am." "Even if it means testifying against your own son?" "Especially if it means that." He studied me for a long moment. "All right. We'll be in touch." I left the office feeling lighter. The system was moving. Slowly, but moving. Over the next week, I stayed in contact with Nora. She kept me updated on the case. Ethan had been formally charged with criminal neglect and endangerment. His lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't budging. They wanted a trial. Lydia was recovering in a rehabilitation facility. The hospital had stabilized her medication levels, and she was regaining strength. I visited her once, bringing flowers in a handmade wooden box. She cried when she saw me. "You saved my life," she said. "I did what anyone should have done." "No, you did what no one else would." I stayed for an hour, listening to her talk about her plans. She wanted to move into an assisted living facility. She wanted to file for separation. She wanted her life back. I told her I'd help however I could. When I left, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The weeks that followed were a slow burn. Ethan was released on bail, but his movements were restricted. He wasn't allowed to contact Lydia. He wasn't allowed to leave the county. His real estate license was suspended pending the outcome of the case. I didn't hear from him directly, but I heard about him. Through Owen, through mutual acquaintances, through the local news, which had picked up the story. Local businessman charged with abandoning disabled wife. The headline made the rounds. People I hadn't spoken to in years called to ask if it was true. I confirmed it and said nothing more. Ethan's reputation collapsed overnight. Clients pulled their contracts, business partners distanced themselves. The man who'd spent years building an image of success watched it crumble in real time. I felt no satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that this was necessary. In early November, Nora called with an update. "The trial's been scheduled for January. The prosecutor wants you to testify in the second week. I'll be ready. There's something else. Ethan's lawyer is planning to call you as a hostile witness. They're going to argue you have a history of resentment toward your son." "Do they have evidence of that?" "No, but they'll imply it. They'll ask about your relationship, your career, why you weren't more involved in his life." "Let them," she paused. "Darren, you need to understand. This is going to be personal. They're going to try to make you look vindictive." "I'm not vindictive. I'm protective." "I know, but a jury might not see it that way." "Then I'll make them see it," she sighed. "All right, just be prepared." I spent the next 2 months preparing. I reviewed my notes every evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a notebook open in front of me. Each page represented a piece of the puzzle, timestamps, locations, conversations. I rehearsed my testimony with Nora twice a week, answering her questions until my responses became second nature. I made sure every detail was locked in my memory, every date confirmed, every observation clear. The work kept me grounded. When doubt crept in, and it did, late at night when the house was silent, I reminded myself why I was doing this. Lydia's face in that wheelchair, Ethan's calm indifference as he drove away, the trembling in her hands. I also kept working in my shop. Orders for my furniture increased after the news broke. People seemed to respect what I'd done. They wanted to support me in small ways. A bookshelf here, a coffee table there, a set of picture frames. It wasn't much, but it was something. Each order felt like validation, not of my choice to turn in my son, but of my choice to remain independent, to keep moving forward. One evening in mid-November, a woman ordered a custom dining table. She left a note with her payment. "Thank you for standing up for what's right." I read it 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it in my desk drawer. Owen visited regularly. He brought food, casseroles, sandwiches, soup his wife made, and asked how I was doing. Sometimes we sat in silence, watching television or working on small projects in the garage. Other times we talked about everything except Ethan. "You holding up?" he asked one evening in December. "I'm managing." "You don't have to pretend with me, Darren. This is hard." "Hard things are worth doing." He nodded slowly. "You sound like Dad." He taught me well. Owen set down his beer and looked at me directly. You know people are talking, right? Saying you went too far. Saying family should protect family." "Family should protect the innocent. Lydia is family too." "I know, I'm just warning you. The trial's going to bring all this up again. It's going to get worse before it gets better." "I'm prepared for that." "Are you really?" I met his gaze. "I have to be." Christmas came and went. I spent it quietly in my workshop, building a rocking chair for Lydia. The design was simple but elegant, curved armrests, smooth runners, a high back for support. I sanded every surface until it felt like silk under my fingers. I applied 3 coats of finish, waiting patiently between each layer. When I delivered it to the rehabilitation facility 2 days after Christmas, Lydia sat in her wheelchair near the window of her room. The winter sun cast long shadows across the floor. She looked stronger than the last time I'd seen her. Her eyes were clearer, her hands steadier. "Darren," she said softly when I wheeled the chair into her room. "Merry Christmas. A little late." She stared at the rocking chair, then at me. Tears welled in her eyes. "You made this?" "I did." "It's beautiful. It's sturdy. The therapist said you might be ready to try sitting without the wheelchair for short periods. This'll be more comfortable than those hospital chairs." She reached out and touched the armrest, running her fingers along the smooth wood. "You don't have to keep doing this." "I want to." "Why?" "Because you deserve it." She looked at me for a long time, tears streaming down her face. "You're a good man, Darren." "I'm just a father who made a choice." "The right choice." I stayed for another hour. We talked about her recovery, her plans for the new year. She was gaining strength daily. The doctors were optimistic about her progress. She'd started the process of filing for separation from Ethan. She'd found a lawyer who specialized in cases like hers. "I want my life back," she said, "whatever that looks like now." "You'll get it." "Because of you." I shook my head. "Because you're strong enough to take it." When I left, the winter air felt crisp and clean. I drove home slowly, watching the landscape roll by. Bare trees, frozen fields, the last light of day fading behind the hills. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. January arrived with cold winds and gray skies. The trial was set to begin on the 10th. I woke that morning feeling calm. I dressed carefully in dark slacks and a button-down shirt, the closest thing I had to formal wear. I ate a light breakfast, toast and coffee, and reviewed my notes one final time. Then I drove to the courthouse. Nora met me outside. She looked composed, professional, her briefcase in hand. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." "Remember, answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information. Stay calm. Don't let them bait you." "I know." She studied my face. "You look steady." "I am." We went inside. The courthouse smelled like old wood and floor polish. Our footsteps echoed in the marble hallway. We passed through security, climbed 2 flights of stairs, and entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected. Wooden benches, high windows, a raised judge's bench. Ethan sat at the defense table with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed man in an expensive suit named Gregory Vance. Ethan wore a navy suit and a neutral expression. He didn't look at me when I entered. The prosecutor, Lawrence Grant, nodded in my direction. He looked confident, prepared. The judge entered, and everyone stood. The trial began. The first week was procedural. Jury selection took 2 days. Opening statements came next. Lawrence laid out the prosecution's case methodically, presenting evidence, establishing timeline, building narrative. The defense countered with claims of misunderstanding, stress, temporary confusion. The prosecution called witnesses. Caleb Morris testified about the ranger logs, the security footage, the timestamps that placed Ethan's vehicle at the overlook. The paramedics testified about Lydia's condition when they found her, dehydrated, disoriented, dangerously low on medication. The hospital pharmacist testified about the missed prescription refills. Each piece of evidence added weight to the case. Lydia herself took the stand on day 4. She was nervous, but strong. She wore a simple blue dress and sat straight in the witness chair. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. She described the morning Ethan took her to the forest. The confusion, the fear, the realization that he wasn't coming back. The courtroom was silent. The defense tried to rattle her during cross-examination, but she held firm. "Did your husband ever explicitly say he intended to abandon you?" Gregory Vance asked. "He said it was better this way, for both of us." "But he didn't use the word abandon?" "He didn't need to. He drove away and left me there." Vance pressed harder. "Isn't it possible he intended to return? That he simply lost track of time?" Lydia's jaw tightened. "He took my medication with him. He knew I needed it. If he planned to return, why would he do that?" Vance had no answer. When Lydia stepped down, she glanced in my direction. I nodded once. She nodded back. The prosecution rested at the end of week 1. Now it was the defense's turn. And I knew my time was coming. The second week of the trial opened with a sharp cold front that left ice on the courthouse steps. I arrived early, watching my breath fog in the morning air as I climbed toward the entrance. Inside, the building felt warmer, but no less tense. Nora met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She carried 2 coffee cups and handed me one. "You're up today," she said. "I know." "Vance is going to come at you hard. He'll try to paint you as bitter, resentful, looking for revenge against your son." "Let him try." She sipped her coffee. "Remember what we practiced. Short answers. Stay calm. Don't give him ammunition." I remember. We entered the courtroom. Ethan was already seated at the defense table, his posture rigid. He still wouldn't look at me. His lawyer, Gregory Vance, shuffled through papers with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The judge entered. The bailiff called the court to order. Vance stood. "Your Honor, the defense calls Darren Halloway to the stand." I walked forward, my step steady. The bailiff swore me in. I sat in the witness chair and looked out at the courtroom. The jury sat to my left, 12 faces studying me with varying degrees of interest. Lawrence Grant sat at the prosecution table, his expression neutral. Ethan stared at the table in front of him. Vance approached with a thin smile. "Mr. Halloway, thank you for being here." I nodded but said nothing. "You're Ethan Halloway's father, is that correct?" "Yes." "And you were the one who called authorities on the morning of September 16th, reporting that your daughter-in-law had been abandoned?" "Yes." "Can you describe your relationship with your son?" I paused. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "We don't see eye to eye on many things." Vance nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something. "Would you say you resent him?" "No." "No? You don't resent the fact that he became successful while you work in a garage making furniture?" Lawrence stood. "Objection. Relevance." The judge looked at Vance. "Counselor." "Your Honor, I'm establishing the witness's potential bias against my client." "Overruled, but get to the point." Vance turned back to me. "Do you resent your son's success?" "No. I'm proud of what I do. I don't measure my worth by someone else's career. But you do measure your son's character, don't you? You've judged him." "I've observed him." "And based on those observations, you decided to follow him, to spy on him." "I decided to protect Lydia." Vance's smile tightened. "By stalking your own son?" "By making sure he didn't hurt someone who couldn't defend herself." "You had no proof he intended harm." "I had enough to be concerned." "Concerned enough to buy a disposable phone, to hide in the woods, to record him without his knowledge?" "Concerned enough to document what he was doing, yes." Vance walked to the defense table and picked up a document. "Mr. Halloway, when was the last time you had a meaningful conversation with your son before September?" "June, maybe July." 3 months before you accused him of a felony." 3 months before I witnessed him commit one." Vance's jaw tightened. "You claim you witnessed him abandon his wife. But isn't it true you arrived at that overlook before he did? That you positioned yourself to catch him doing something wrong?" "I arrived after he did. I followed at a distance." "A distance? How far?" "Far enough that he didn't see me." "Far enough that you might have misunderstood what was happening?" "I understood perfectly." Vance leaned against the jury box. "Mr. Halloway, have you ever made a mistake? Done something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted?" "Sure." "Is it possible your son made a mistake that morning? That he panicked, made a poor decision, but didn't intend harm?" "No." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I watched him. He wasn't panicked. He was calm, methodical. He set Lydia in that wheelchair, told her it was better this way, and drove off without looking back. Vance straightened. You claim you heard him say, "It's better this way?" Yes. From how far away? 30 feet? Maybe 40? And you're certain of his exact words? Yes. Even though you were hiding in the woods, recording on a phone, emotionally invested in proving him guilty? Lawrence stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. Vance switched tactics. Mr. Halloway, let's talk about the weeks leading up to September 16th. You visited your son's home. You went to the hospital to check on prescription records. You contacted a lawyer. You drove to the ranger station to ask about vehicle logs. Does that sound like the behavior of someone who's simply concerned or someone building a case? I was preparing to protect Lydia if Ethan did what I suspected he would do. So you were planning to intervene? I was planning to document and report. And you saw yourself as the hero in this story? I saw myself as the only person paying attention. Vance walked closer. Did it occur to you that your son might have been struggling? That caring for a disabled spouse is difficult? That he might have needed help rather than surveillance? If he needed help, he should have asked for it. Instead, he talked about getting rid of what he saw as a burden and planned a trip to leave her behind. You keep saying he planned this, but you don't know what he was thinking. I know what he did. Vance stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned to the judge. No further questions. I exhaled slowly. Lawrence Grant stood for redirect. Mr. Halloway, when you recorded the events of September 16th, what was your intention? To create evidence that could protect Lydia and hold Ethan accountable. Did you alter the recording in any way? No. Did you add commentary or edit the footage? No, it's exactly what happened. And when you called the ranger station, did you exaggerate or embellish what you'd seen? No, I reported the facts. Lawrence nodded. Thank you, nothing further. The judge dismissed me. I stepped down and returned to my seat beside Nora. She leaned close. You did well. He tried. He failed. The trial continued. The defense called character witnesses, people who described Ethan as hardworking, dedicated, stressed. They painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by circumstance, not malicious intent, but the prosecution's evidence was stronger. The video, the timestamps, the medical records, Lydia's testimony. By the end of week 2, the case went to the jury. We waited. 3 days passed. I stayed home, working in my shop, keeping my phone nearby. Nora called twice to check in. Owen visited once, bringing dinner and silent company. On the 4th day, the call came. They have a verdict, Nora said. I drove to the courthouse. The courtroom filled quickly. Media representatives lined the back rows. Lydia sat in the front, her wheelchair positioned near the aisle. She looked calm but tense. The jury filed in. I studied their faces, trying to read something, anything. The judge asked for the verdict. The foreperson stood. In the case of the state versus Ethan Halloway, on the charge of criminal neglect, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted in whispers. On the charge of reckless endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. Ethan's face went pale. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, but Ethan didn't move. The judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing date for 3 weeks later. I sat motionless, letting the weight of the moment settle. Lydia turned in her wheelchair and looked at me. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. I nodded. Outside, the winter air felt sharp and clean. Nora stood beside me on the courthouse steps. You did it, she said. The system did it. You started it. I looked out at the parking lot, at the people walking to their cars, at the world moving forward. Yeah, I said quietly. I did. Sentencing was scheduled for February 2nd. The 3 weeks between the verdict and that date stretched long and strange. The media coverage intensified. Local news, regional papers, even a segment on a national cable network. They called it a story about justice, about family betrayal, about one man's courage to stand against his own son. I didn't watch any of it. I stayed in my workshop, filling orders, sanding wood, keeping my hands busy. The rhythm of the work grounded me. Chisel, sand, measure, cut, repeat. Owen stopped by every few days, sometimes with his wife Margaret. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She hugged me the first time she visited after the verdict. You did right, she said simply. I know. People are going to say otherwise. Ignore them. I plan to. She pulled back and studied my face. How are you really doing? I considered the question. I'm relieved. Tired, but relieved. Good. That's honest. Owen and I sat in the garage that evening, working on a bookshelf I'd promised to a customer in town. He measured while I cut, our movements synchronized from years of working together on various projects. You heard from Ethan? Owen asked after a long silence. No. You think you will? I don't know. Probably not. Owen set down the measuring tape. Does that bother you? No. We stopped being father and son the moment he decided Lydia was disposable. That's harsh. It's true. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess it is. We worked until dark, then ordered pizza and ate in the kitchen. Margaret joined us, bringing a salad she'd made. We talked about everything except the trial. Her garden plans for spring, Owen's idea to build a shed, a documentary they'd watched about deep-sea exploration. You miss it? Margaret asked. The diving? Sometimes, I admitted. I miss the quiet, the focus. But my knees don't miss the pressure. She smiled. Age gets us all. Not gracefully. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen with a glass of water and my notebook. I flipped through the pages, all those observations, timestamps, fragments of conversation. It felt like reading someone else's notes now. The urgency had drained away, leaving only facts. I closed the notebook and put it in a drawer. Lydia called the next morning. Darren, I wanted to check in, see how you're holding up. I'm fine. How about you? Nervous about sentencing, but ready. You're going to be there. I want to give a victim impact statement. My lawyer thinks it'll help. It will, she paused. I've been thinking about what I want to say, about what he did, what you did. It's hard to put into words. You'll find them. I hope so. Another pause. Darren, I don't think I ever properly thanked you. You have, multiple times. Not enough. You gave me my life back. You gave me a chance to be more than what he tried to make me. I felt my throat tighten. You were always more than that, Lydia, always. I didn't feel like it, not until you showed me I mattered. We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me about her therapy progress, her plans to move into an assisted living apartment in March, her hope to eventually find work again, maybe remote, something she could do from home. I'm rebuilding, she said. Slowly, but I'm doing it. That's all anyone can ask. When we hung up, I stood at the window watching birds gather at the feeder in my yard. Sparrows mostly, with a few cardinals mixed in. They moved with purpose, pecking seeds, fluttering away, returning, life continuing. February arrived with snow. Not much, just enough to dust the ground and make the roads slick. On the morning of the 2nd, I woke early and dressed in the same clothes I'd worn to trial. I drove carefully to the courthouse, arriving 30 minutes before the hearing. The courtroom was less crowded this time, no media in the back rows, just family, lawyers, and a few observers. Lydia sat in her wheelchair near the front again, her posture straight. Ethan entered with his lawyer. He looked thinner than before, his suit hanging loose on his frame. His eyes were hollow. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Lawrence Grant presented the prosecution's sentencing recommendation, 4 years in state prison, followed by probation. He cited the severity of the crime, the vulnerability of the victim, the calculated nature of the act. Gregory Vance argued for leniency, 2 years with possibility of parole, citing Ethan's lack of prior criminal record, his cooperation during the investigation, his remorse. Then Lydia was called to speak. She wheeled herself to a position near the witness stand. The courtroom went silent. Your Honor, she began, her voice clear. 2 years ago, I was in an accident that changed my life. I lost mobility. I lost independence. But I didn't lose hope, not then. She paused, gathering herself. I lost hope when my husband started treating me like a burden instead of a person, when he stopped refilling my medications, when he stopped looking at me, when he drove me into the woods and left me there to suffer. Her voice cracked but held. He didn't just abandon me that day. He tried to erase me, to make me disappear so he could move on with his life unencumbered. If not for Darren Halloway, if not for someone who cared enough to notice, to watch, to act, I would have suffered alone in that forest. I might not have survived. She looked directly at Ethan for the first time. You were my husband. You promised to stand by me. Instead, you discarded me. And for that, I hope you face the full consequences of your choices. She wheeled back to her spot. The courtroom remained silent. The judge reviewed the case file, then looked at Ethan. Mr. Halloway, do you wish to make a statement before sentencing? Ethan stood slowly. His lawyer whispered something, but Ethan shook his head. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Very well. Ethan Halloway, you have been found guilty of criminal neglect and reckless endangerment. These are serious crimes that demonstrate a profound failure of character and responsibility. You exploited your wife's vulnerability for your own convenience. You acted with premeditation and callousness." He paused. "I hereby sentence you to 5 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 3. Additionally, upon release, you will serve 3 years of supervised probation. You are prohibited from contacting the victim for the duration of your sentence and probation." The gavel fell. Ethan's shoulders sagged. His lawyer spoke quietly to him, but Ethan didn't respond. Guards approached and led him away. I watched him go, feeling nothing but emptiness where anger used to live. Outside, snow had started falling again. Lydia waited near the courthouse entrance, her wheelchair positioned under the awning. "It's done," she said when I approached. "It is." 5 years, that's more than I expected. It's what he deserved. She looked up at the falling snow. I keep thinking about what happens next. For me, I mean. I have this chance now, this freedom, and I don't want to waste it. You won't. How do you know? Because you're stronger than you think. She smiled, tears glistening. I learned that from you. I stayed with her until her ride arrived, a van from the assisted living facility where she was temporarily staying. I helped the driver load her wheelchair, then watched as they pulled away. Nora appeared beside me. "You heading home?" she asked. "Yeah." "Good. You've earned some peace." I drove home slowly through the snow. The roads were quiet. The world felt muffled, soft. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the truck for a long moment, engine running, heat blowing. Then I turned it off and went inside. The house was quiet, warm, mine. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Through the window, I watched the snow fall, coating the workshop roof, the trees, the ground. I thought about everything that had led to this moment, the choices, the consequences, the cost of doing what was right. It had been worth it, every second. 3 months passed in quiet routine. Winter faded into early spring. I filled furniture orders, worked in my shop, occasionally met Owen for lunch. Life moved forward with the steady rhythm of sawdust and sanded wood. Lydia moved into her assisted living apartment in March. I helped her arrange furniture, hang pictures, set up her small kitchen. She showed me around with pride, the accessible bathroom, the wide doorways, the small balcony overlooking a courtyard. "It's mine," she said. "Really mine. It suits you." She'd started online work, doing data entry and customer service from her computer. It wasn't much, but it was independence. She smiled more now, laughed easier. I visited every 2 weeks, always bringing something: flowers, a wooden cutting board, a framed photo of the mountains she loved. Ethan remained in prison. I received one letter from him in April. I burned it without opening it. Owen asked about it later. "You sure you don't want to know what he said?" "I'm sure." "No curiosity?" "None." He studied me. "You've made peace with it?" "I made the right choice. That's all the peace I need." One Saturday in late April, Nora called. "I thought you should know. Ethan's lawyer filed an appeal." "On what grounds?" "Ineffective counsel, bias in jury selection, the usual desperation plays." "Will it work?" "No. The evidence is too solid, but it'll drag things out another year." I sat with that information for a moment. "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" "What else is there to say? The system will handle it." She laughed softly. "You've changed, Darren." "How so?" "You're calmer, more settled." "I did what needed doing. Now I'm living." "Good. That's exactly what you should be doing." May arrived with warm breezes and green leaves. I worked in my shop with the garage door open, letting fresh air circulate. Orders kept coming: a dining table, 2 bookshelves, a set of kitchen stools. People seemed to trust my work more now. Maybe it was the publicity. Maybe it was something else. I didn't question it. I just built. One afternoon, Lydia called. "I got a job offer." "That's great. Doing what?" "Customer advocacy for a medical supply company. They want someone who understands the patient side of things. It's remote, full-time, decent pay. You taking it?" "I already accepted." I heard the smile in her voice. "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of me too." She paused. "Darren, I've been thinking. I want to do something for you, something to say thank you properly." "You don't need to." "I want to. I'm commissioning you to build something, a dining table, big enough for 6. I want to host dinners, have people over, start building a life that includes community." "I'd be honored." "Good. I'll send you measurements and my budget." "Keep your budget. This one's on me." "Darren, I insist." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay, thank you." I spent the next 3 weeks designing and building that table. Oak, solid construction, smooth edges. I carved small details into the legs. Vines, leaves, symbols of growth. It was the finest piece I'd made in years. When I delivered it in early June, Lydia cried. "It's perfect. It's strong. Like you." She ran her hands over the surface. "I can't wait to fill this with people. With laughter, with life." "You will." I stayed for dinner that night, the first meal at the new table. She'd made pasta, salad, bread. We ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. When I left, she hugged me tight. "You gave me more than evidence," she said. "You gave me hope. You gave yourself hope. I just opened the door." June turned to July. The days grew longer, hotter. I started work on a new project, a rocking chair for myself, something to sit in on the porch during summer evenings. One afternoon, Owen stopped by. "Heard from Margaret. She saw Lydia at the grocery store. Says she looks good." "She is good. Because of you. Because she chose to be." Owen leaned against the workbench. "You ever regret it? Turning him in?" I considered the question. "No." "Not even a little?" "Not even a little?" He nodded. "Good. You shouldn't." We worked together that afternoon, building the rocking chair frame. When it was done, we sat on the porch, drinking cold beer, watching the sun set behind the trees. "You know what I admire about you," Owen said. "What?" "You didn't wait for someone else to fix things. You saw what needed to be done, and you did it." "Anyone would have?" "No, they wouldn't. Most people look away. You didn't." I sipped my beer. I couldn't look away. That's what makes it matter. Summer deepened. The case appeal was denied. Ethan's sentence stood. I received notification in the mail and filed it away without comment. Life continued. I built furniture. I visited Lydia. I had dinners with Owen and Margaret. I watched the seasons change. And one evening in late August, I sat in my new rocking chair on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. The phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered. "Hello?" "Mr. Halloway, this is Caleb Morris, the ranger from last year." "I remember. I wanted to reach out. Let you know that because of your actions, we've implemented new protocols, regular welfare checks on vehicles at overlooks, better monitoring systems. You probably saved more lives than just Lydia's." I sat with that for a moment. "I appreciate you telling me." "You did good, sir. Real good." We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. I rocked slowly in the chair, feeling the smooth wood beneath my hands. The air smelled like pine and earth. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. I thought about Ethan in his cell, about Lydia in her apartment, about all the choices that had led us here. I thought about justice and what it cost, and I realized I'd do it all again, every single second. The forest had been silent that day in September, but I hadn't been, and because I spoke, someone lived. That was enough. That was everything.